he knew of someone who was a former shoreline crip who had just gotten out of prison who was looking for a driver. And so he brought me over and introduced me to this guy. And the two of us began to work together. And I would drive him around and help him make his deliveries. And he would give me free product and also money. And we started to develop this friendship and this relationship, which ultimately, as I talk about in my first book, Lost in Ghost Town, was the real impetus for me to ultimately get sober.
This is Meredith for Real, the Curious Introvert, and I'm Meredith. I explore the questions people think but don't ask out loud, either because they're taboo or thanks to cultural hypnosis. My mission, and yours if you choose to accept it, is to inspire curiosity by exploring the nuance and paradox of our world. Each episode is different, so bring your ADD and your earbuds and have a look around. Hey Curiositors, it's me, Meredith. I've covered a few sobriety stories here on the show, but this one is the first guest whose drug dealer helped him get clean. You'll hear my guest talk about addiction in a way that I know I've never heard it described before as A, common to the human experience, and B, as an energy that flows through us and causes problems when it gets stuck. He covers this as we weave in and out of his story of how he met his drug dealer, gang member boss. Yeah, all those things. He actually worked for him too. And how he eventually got clean. If you end up liking this episode, I know you'll also like the one with the man who used to live in the Vegas tunnels. That one is episode 138. If you're a loyal listener, thank you so much for pressing play today. And remember, if you think of someone you know while you're listening, share this episode with that person. It helps me grow the show and spread the message of curiosity. And if you're new here, welcome. Around here, we press play to get curious, disrupt the algorithm, and grow into better humans. We talk about everything from nutrition to near-death experiences. So bring your ADD and your earbuds and have a look around. There's no specific order to listen to episodes. We all joke about how we're addicted to our coffee, late-night Amazon purchases, and our phones. But what is addiction really? Where does it come from? My next guest went from partying with celebrities in his New York City penthouse to being homeless on the beach in Venice, California. He was trapped in a cycle of addiction to crack cocaine, selling everything he owned to get more, begging on street corners, and eventually accepting a job as a driver for a high-ranking member of the Crips in exchange for both drugs and money. It was this arrangement that led to an unlikely friendship with the gang member that became a key part of his process towards permanent recovery. He's since become a psychologist with a private practice and an author of 2 books, including We Are All Addicts. Today, he's going to share how an addiction may not be as far off as you think, but neither is recovery. 17 years sober, family man, optimist, Dr. Carter Stout. Thank you so much for being here.
My pleasure.
I really, 3 reallys, am enjoying your book, We Are All Addicts. And I think one of the things that I love about it the most is you address the stereotype of an addict, which whether we're aware of it or not, I think we all have. The person who always needs something. They need a ride. They need money. They're unreliable. They lie. You can't trust anything that they say. And it's always a they problem and never an us problem. And I suspect that that is part of the reason why some of the addictions that I named fly under the radar and are not really, considered in that category. But also, I think that is what prevents us from getting over it. So thank you so much for writing that book. First of all, I think it's very relatable.
Thank you so much. Thanks for reading it. And I feel as though you're absolutely right that addiction in Western culture, especially, has really been stigmatized as this other situation that people have. And in the book, I'm really trying to normalize this concept of addiction as not something that's so frightening, but something that we all share archetypally. And what I mean by archetypally is that it's something that we all know and that we've all experienced. It's in our DNA. It's part of the human process, part of the human experience. And at some point in our lives, we engage in addictive cycles. Pretty much everyone I know. And we think of addiction, really, we're taught that it's about drugs or it's about alcohol or gambling. And it's much more universal than that and much more pervasive than that. And that's really what I'm trying to get across in my book.
Well, I think when people think about an addict, it's not a behavior as much as it is an identity. And it's a permanent identity. And I have seen both sides. I have seen people that are resistant towards labeling their behavior or their inclinations or whatever towards addictive anything because they want to avoid this permanent label. And I have seen people who over-identify with the label of addict, and it's like they can't have, even one conversation without talking about it in the first person as though it's like somebody that like lives in their house with them.
Yeah. I mean, even in the most accepting communities that are traditionally set up for addicts in our culture and even globally, the place that I initially went to find sobriety and try and to get recovery, which is Alcoholics Anonymous or any of the 12-step programs, the second word in the title is anonymous. And it really lends itself to the belief that we have to keep this a secret, that it's not okay for you to share because perhaps you'll be judged if you reveal that you have some sort of an issue with the substance. So, even the most inclusive program out there has this caveat to it, which is the messaging around it is that you don't have to tell anyone, that this is a private matter, which in some cases I agree with. I don't believe that people have to wear their recovery on their shirt sleeve, but I also feel as though if we understood it differently and began talking about it differently, that people would be more inclined to not to have shame around it or guilt around it, which is really the way that I feel.
Well, and that's the way that you laid out the book also. And so I want to talk about some of the, not underdogs, that's definitely not the right word, but the under-recognized areas of addiction that are more universal than definitely cocaine. But I want to go back to what I might consider the beginning-ish of your story, at least the part closest to the end, which was when you had left that inpatient rehabilitation center and you were feeling good, you were like motivated, and then you fell back into old habits. Can you kind of kick us off from there?
Sure. I had gone to conventional treatment at a facility in West Los Angeles and was very enthusiastic about my early recovery. And then I went to a sober living house where I stayed for a few months. And I had never lived on the west side of Los Angeles. I'd always been in Hollywood. I didn't really know very much about Venice or Santa Monica. And I thought, this would be a perfect place for me to live. Venice, close to the water. There are yoga studios around. People live holistically. And so I left sober living and I got a small studio apartment close to the water. And about 2 weeks after moving in, I was walking up Abbot Kinney And this was before Abbot Kinney had really been gentrified and before the neighborhoods in Venice had been gentrified. And I didn't really know this. And walking up the street in the middle of the day, I was confronted by a drug dealer who said, what do you need? And in that moment, I really was consumed by this desire. The addictive energy was still in me. And I bought some cocaine and went back to my apartment and did it. And that was the beginning of being off to the races again for another few years.
You talk a lot about an addictive energy in your book, and that was not anything that I'd ever heard before. And you describe it as something that flows through the body, but for some people gets stuck, and then they are stuck. Can you explain that more? Because that was like a big light bulb for me.
Yeah. My belief is that addiction is energy. It's emotional energy, just like anger, just like anxiety, that we experience it at certain times in our lives, but it's not really ours to keep, and we release it. We have the capacity to release anxiety. Most people do. When we're angry, we have some sort of an outburst or we feel a certain way, and then we are able to clear it. But addiction is a little more tricky, but it's the same kind of emotional energy. And most of the addictive cycles that we get involved in are not chemical dependency, the way addiction is really traditionally thought of. It is a psychological addiction. We become attached to an idea. And the cycle that we get caught up in is to think about something obsessively, and then that will lead to some sort of compulsive action. So this is true with foods. If we are trying to be healthier about our relationship with food, but we continuously are thinking about eating something, and we're consumed by this sort of obsessive pattern of thinking about it, and that leads us to compulsively go and eat something, then I would categorize that as being in an addictive cycle.
And food is an interesting example for you to give, because you talk in the book about how really anorexia and bulimia were your first addictions, which is pretty uncommon for a teenage boy.
It's true. At about the age of 12, when my parents were beginning the process of their divorce, and I could sense that something was shifting in our family, and I was in a lot of confusion and a lot of emotional pain, I began to obsessively restrict food. And psychologically, I think it was the way that I could control a situation that was out of control. It was really the one way in which I could handle it. And that relationship with food and the restricting of food led to anorexia and ultimately led to bulimia, and which stayed in my life for over 10 years. That addictive energy was never treated. It was never understood. I really couldn't understand what was happening. And certainly at the time, in the late 70s in Washington, D.C., there weren't really the systems in place for me to go somewhere or to talk to someone specifically about this issue. And so it was swept under the rug.
I could totally see that happening. And, everyone is familiar with the idea that your addiction just hops to different areas, right? So like you have an addiction here. Smoking is always the one, right? That people say, oh, well, I quit smoking, but now sugar is usually the next one. And now I am addicted to sugar, and then it just keeps moving. And so when you explain it as energy in motion, that checks out. And for you, that went to cocaine. So
Hmm.
how,
Went to alcohol first, and then to cocaine, and then to heroin, and then to love and sex and nicotine, certainly caffeine, a lot of different ways it manifested itself.
wow, you definitely didn't leave anything off the table. You're the perfect person to be a therapist now.
I know, I know, it is true.
So how did you end up meeting the drug dealer, the gang member drug dealer, not the drug dealer that approached you on the street?
Well, I had exhausted all of my resources. I had sold all of my possessions, my clothes. I was several months overdue on my rent. But the one thing that I did have was a car, and it was an old beat up Ford Taurus. And a person that was in the neighborhood of, we called it Ghost Town in Venice, which is a neighborhood right next to Abbot Kinney. He knew of someone who was a former Shoreline Crip who had just gotten out of prison, who was looking for a driver. And so he brought me over and introduced me to this guy. And the two of us began to work together. And I would drive him around and help him make his deliveries. And he would give me free product and also money. And we started to develop this friendship and this relationship, which ultimately, as I talk about in my first book, Lost in Ghost Town, was the real impetus for me to ultimately get sober. Was this friendship and this feeling of acceptance and this feeling of love from he and from his grandmother that propelled me to want to start getting better.
How was he different from other drug dealers that you had been around?
Well, I feel like he had a very similar experience that I had in childhood. He had had a mother who was a drug addict, and my mother was an alcoholic. His father abandoned him, and my father abandoned me. He was sent off to juvie, and I was sent off to boarding school. So we had these very
Hmm.
different but almost parallel narratives. And he had been brought up by his grandmother, who had instilled in him these really strong family values and this spirituality. And I was brought up by a nanny and also by my grandmother, who had instilled these values in me. And so we realized quite quickly that we had a lot in common, even though we were from these vastly different socioeconomic and racial backgrounds. We had a lot in common, and he was just trying to make money for himself and for his family. There was this real spiritual connection that we had, and this connection that was rooted in this understanding of family.
Most people, if they become buddy with their dealer, and certainly if their dealer is also their employer, that would lead to a situation where they would be more addicted. And you are completely opposite. I'm not sure how that happened. Was that, do you see now with all of your, education and hindsight, do you see why that the end result was recovery for you and not deeper addiction? Or do you think it was a little luck?
Well, the path to deeper addiction was death for me. I was on the verge. The cocaine at that point was creating a deep psychosis, and it was not a pleasurable experience. But I still had a really difficult time stopping, and suffered a lot of emotional trauma growing up. And what I recognized was that it was really love that I needed. I needed friendship, and I needed a sense of family to help me heal some of those beliefs in me and those places in me that were very wounded. And he provided me with the opportunity to do that. And so it led me to recognizing that I had value. At my core, I was a good person. And he helped me remember that.
Wow. So it was it was a legit friendship. It wasn't a coworker friendship. It wasn't a friendship of convenience.
He was like a best friend. He was like a brother to me.
Wow. That's incredible. When you were able to release that addictive energy, was it gradual? Was there a moment where so much of it left you that you thought, okay, this is it. This is going to stick this time?
Well, what's interesting about addictive energy is that it resurfaces and it comes back. And so it took me a long time to really understand how to treat it within myself. So there were times where I would have a relapse and I would go back out there for a little while. But ultimately, the all of the compounded information that I was receiving from the recovery programs, from people that I trusted that were in recovery, from the spiritual quest that I was on, from my education in school, ultimately led to a cultivation of a spiritual program that worked for me.
We're going to take a quick break to appreciate those who support the show. When we come back, you'll hear what addictive energy feels like in the body, the drug dealer's reaction to Dr. Carter getting sober, and the role of the soul.
Never was able to take control of my life again. But it's something that that I witness now and am aware of, not only in myself but in others. I just know how to see it and how to spot it and how to treat it now.
If you ever wonder where I find guests for the show, the answer is it varies a lot. And since it's something that gets asked a lot, I started including the backstory of each episode in my Monday emails. And then on Saturday, I share cliff notes and clickable links in case what you heard was so good you wish you could have taken notes. If you want to be included, text REAL to 66866 if you're in the US, or go to meredithforreal.com if you're elsewhere. If you're listening north of the state of Georgia, mosquitoes are not top of mind right now. But if you're in the Florida Panhandle or Gulf Coast of Alabama, you're already dusting off your grill and citronella candles. Make life easy for future you and get your property scheduled for a mosquito treatment with Insect. I've been using them since 2019 and they continue to impress me. They guarantee their work and pollinators are always top of mind. Check them out at ensec.net. If you watch the show on YouTube, then you see the beautiful backdrop of Trader John's, the exhibit where I record the show inside the Pensacola Museum of History. This is just one museum under the umbrella of the UWF Historic Trust. If you're planning a trip to Pensacola and need an indoor activity option, pick up a ticket. It's good for a whole week. Get your tickets in person so you can show the agent one of my emails and get $2 off an adult ticket. Now back to the show. Remember to stay till the end where I give you a sneak peek of next week's episode. How do you witness it in your own body? What's that experience like for you?
Tendency to want more of something, the tendency to feel romantic about some sort of dangerous activity. There's still that energy that comes up in me on occasion. I'm able to feel it and able to soothe it very quickly now.
Do they teach any of this stuff in the inpatient rehabs? Because I feel like relapse.
Philosophy in the inpatient rehabs is very different from my philosophy about addiction. Most rehabs consider addiction a disease and think of it as genetic, and it's something that you're going to have for life. And I don't feel that way. I feel as though it's energy, as we said before, and that it shows up at certain times in our life, maybe when we're worn down emotionally, or we're going through some transitional phase, or we're feeling fragile, or we're dealing with old beliefs about ourselves, but that it comes and goes. And in the book, I say it comes and goes like the wind through the trees. It's not something that's permanent. And most of the old model, the treatment facilities that exist in the United States really look at it as, well, this is a permanent thing that you're going to have for the rest of your life, and you're going to have to treat it every day. And, so it's sort of a curse that you have. And I don't believe that at all.
I've definitely heard that. And I think that's what keeps people from thinking about the, run of the mill addictions as not really addictions. So actually, how do you tell if something is an addiction or just a bad habit? What's the difference there?
If you engage in a cycle of addictive thoughts about something, could be work. You come home from work, but you're still thinking about it obsessively. You're like, I have so much to do. And it's taking time away from other activities in your life, being with your family, being with your kids, being able to relax. And you are consumed with this obsessive thought of, oh, this presentation that I'm having tomorrow. And it compels you to go and sit down at your computer and continue to work. You are caught in an addictive cycle around work addiction. So it's those obsessive thoughts that lead to compulsive action. We do it all the time with our phones.
All the time.
And phones and technology have been written about a lot as sort of the new addiction that is scourging society and our relationship with our phones. And we use them constantly. And we think about a post that we've done and we check it compulsively to see how many follows we've gotten or how many likes we've gotten, or, that sort of relationship with the phone falls right into the category of what I consider an addictive cycle.
And almost no one will be like, oh, I'm not addicted to my phone. I think that's one people readily admit. But it's interesting. You think because of the 12-step program stuff, right? Like, what do they say? Admitting it is the first step. Well, apparently not, because we're all still addicted to our phones. You also talk about resentment.
Just to intervene, I did a news program, and it was about cell phone addiction. And during the interviewer, there was a panel of people that were sitting to the left, and the camera panned over, and all three of them were on their phones while we were having the interview.
Oh my gosh. That's crazy. Oh my God. Yeah. No. But it's true. But it's absolutely true. And you have to really be intentional about breaking that connection and not seeing your phone as an appendage, right? But resentment and anger was another one in your book. And I interviewed Dr. Brandon Warmke about how being outraged and angry can be cathartic, but how it is also an addictive cycle. So I think my listeners are pretty familiar with that concept. The one that stood out to me that I'm not familiar with as an addictive cycle is exaggeration and lies. So I'd love for you to talk about that.
There's a lot of focus in my book about our relationship to our higher self, or our authentic self, which I call the soul, and that we are in constant conflict between our soul, which is our highest good, and the ego, which is really the distillation of our human experience. So the disappointments that we go through, the confusion, the emotional pain, the sense of loss, the getting our heart broken, and all of the beliefs that we establish according to the human experience live in the ego. And to be completely honest, is not really part of the human experience. It's part of our spiritual experience, which is really our authentic nature. But most human beings, as we go through life, we spend more time attached to our ego than we do to our spiritual self. And so to be truly honest about something is very difficult for us, because we're conditioned from a very young age to exaggerate a bit. There's pressure on us to be something, to present ourselves as something. And so we might, just change the truth, just alter it a little bit. And that starts to become habitual and a defense mechanism for us. And so we start to use it. And then, there's also this idea that's very prevalent that many people have, that if we tell the truth to somebody and we try and set a boundary, or we in some way or constructively criticize them, that's going to lead to some sort of confrontation. Or potentially it could lead to them not wanting to be our friend, or not, that might push them away. Once again, as adults, oftentimes we change the truth a little bit and don't really reveal how we're truthfully feeling to protect someone else's feelings, so that we feel safe and don't feel as though we're going to be, get a negative response or a negative reaction that's going to create confrontation, or that we're going to be abandoned by that person. So this has led to an obsession about how we communicate with one another, and whether or not, how we tailor and how we cultivate what we say to other people. An example would be when somebody asks you, which we do very commonly, how are you doing? And the response that's programmed, that we're taught, is, oh, I'm doing great. Yeah, everything's good. And the truth is that not everything is good, and we're usually not doing great. We're usually struggling with one thing or another, but we don't really want to talk about that or reveal that to someone else, because it's a little personal and we're protective. And so instead of saying, you know what, I'm not feeling that great today emotionally. I'm struggling with something. I'm having a hard time with my mother, or I'm feeling insecure about a relationship I'm in. We say, I'm doing great.
Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah. In the South, we are no strangers to exaggerating. I mean, growing up, it was, and my Midwestern family also, my mom's side from the South, my dad's side from the Midwest. And it was like, you were a shitty storyteller if you weren't making the fish from this big to this big. And so,
right, the hyperbole.
Yeah. But I love that you also brought up when people, kind of inversely lie to, keep distance or to maintain peace. That obviously didn't cross my mind, which is very telling of my personality. I'll tell a lie to make you laugh, but I won't necessarily, do it to make you feel better about yourself. So that's so fascinating. I love that you talked about the soul in correlation to lies too, not a connection I had made previously. And that the, what did you call it? A human nature, which brought me back to like Sunday school, which we would call the sinful nature, which is in other traditions called the ego. It's like, it's all very similar, but we don't often connect it to how we behave day to day. And it keeps us separate from people who have like quote unquote big problems, big addictions, but really we're all pretty similar.
Well, in the book, We're All Addicts, and the subtitle is The Soul's Guide to Kicking Your Compulsions. And I place a lot of emphasis on the soul in the book. And there are many exercises in the book that are tailored towards developing and cultivating a deeper relationship with our soul. So our authentic self, or our highest good, or our spiritual self. And I feel as though, and I talk about in the book, that when we are connected to soul, addiction loses its oxygen, loses breath. And the more connected to soul that we are, the less we are going to be consumed in any way by addictive cycles in our life. And that is true with honesty, because deception is not a product of the soul. It doesn't live in the soul. So if we are in a place of soul, then we are going to be completely truthful. And it's the same with addiction. Addiction has no correlation to soul. So when we're in a soul-based place, addiction that energy will leave us completely.
You credit soul as the strongest apparatus towards addiction recovery in your book. If someone is listening to this and they're completely, I want you to imagine for me, my most Midwestern male relative for a moment. Like he looks like a lumberjack. He is maybe in his between 40 and 55, a tough guy who has no practice expressing his feelings. And he's like, soul, that's like the thing that goes to heaven or hell, right? How can someone like that begin to understand what you're talking about within themselves? How can they get in touch with their soul to break the cycle of addiction in their lives, however severe it is?
What I would say is that let's just remove all the religious affiliation and context from the conversation. This doesn't have anything to do with that. When I think of soul, I think of how we come into the world when we're children. We're not consumed by fear for the most part. We're not consumed by a competitiveness. We're not consumed by disappointment. We are very connected to ourselves. And so when someone has a hard time understanding this concept of soul, I will often do exercises with them of, let's try and bring you back into your childhood and remember what it really felt for you to have that authentic voice. Before you had all of these human experiences that were distracting and that were painful and that were disappointing, before your self-consciousness. So when you were purely connected to that authentic self when you were 6 years old, 8 years old, and let's try and bring you back there. That is the place of soul that I'm talking about.
That checks out. I think my Midwestern family, they could wrap their heads around that. I love that. Let's go back to your story and kind of how it ends. Was the drug dealer, as you began to venture down a path of sobriety, what was his reaction to that?
He was extremely happy.
Really?
He wanted me to get off the drugs. Yeah. Once again, the drug dealing was a vehicle for him to provide for his family and really nothing more. And he wanted me to be happy. And he could see that the drugs were not making me happy. And he wanted me to be healthy. He had seen in his lifetime a lot of death and destruction affiliated with drug use. And so he was extremely happy. He wanted me to get sober. And when I did, he recognized that there was sort of a marked difference in my behavior, my demeanor, my energy.
Wow. Was the use of psychedelic drugs at any point a part of your recovery? I know that's worked for a lot of people.
Later in my recovery, after I became a psychologist, after I had done, all of my schooling and I became a working mental health professional, I began to explore some fringe type of treatments. And there was one in particular called Iboga, which is a plant from West Africa, from Gabon, West Africa, that they take the roots of this tree called the Iboga tree and they grind it up, and it's purely 100% organic, and it's administered, and one has a psychoactive experience, but it is incredibly effective. And I had a profound experience on it. And it helped me clear some of the emotional trauma of my childhood and some of the beliefs that I'd established around that emotional trauma about myself. And it got to places in me that the years of therapy I had been through never could get to.
Wow.
So it was pretty it's a pretty incredible thing. And it's not available here in the United States. It's not legal. So I went down to Brazil and went into the rainforest and had an experience there with some practitioners.
Wow.
And it's something that I'm an advocate of, and I really believe it also has powerful healing properties towards both physical and psychological addiction. And so it's an alternative to traditional treatment that I am very excited about. And I believe that, in the next decade or so, it will come to the United States and be legalized, and it will have a dramatic impact on the opioid crisis and other traditional addictions that people are going through here.
Oh, that would be amazing. So how did the story end with your, with the drug dealer that was your friend? Flynn was his name. What happened to Flynn?
Flynn was arrested and he was incarcerated, and it was his third strike. And so he was sentenced to 25 years to life in prison. And his family that lived in Venice left and moved to down south to Atlanta. And I really lost touch with them, unfortunately. He didn't want to be visited in prison. He didn't want to have contact with the outside world. And I found out something had happened with this case, and that he actually was let out a few years later. And he moved down south with his family, and he got caught up in some addictive cycles again, and part of that dangerous world, and he passed away.
Oh, I'm so sorry. And what about his grandma?
She also passed away before he did.
Man, that's tough. If you could say anything to Flynn now, what would you want him to know?
I would just tell him that I love him and thank him for his really incredible impact on my life, and just to thank him.
And if someone was listening to this and they're struggling with their own addictive cycles, no matter how accepted or stigmatized they are in our society, what would you want them to know?
Thank you very much.
I want them to know that it's not a permanent situation for you. That addiction is energy, that it comes and goes. And if you learn how to treat it when it arises in you, and my belief is that treating it through spiritual means and forming a connection with the soul is the most effective way. I'm now almost 18 years sober, and this is what I do. And I do it on a daily basis. I say prayer in the morning. I connect with my soul. I ask for it to speak through me and for my highest good to be revealed. And this has kept me sober for a long time from all my addictions.
Wow.
And so I would say to them, I want you to have hope. This isn't a curse for you. This is not genetic. It's not in your DNA. It's not something that you won't be able to shake, regardless of what it is, if it's cell phone addiction or if it's addiction to heroin, that there's a path forward and you can be free of it.
Well, thank you for being here, both today and just being on this planet. I'm glad that you made it and that you're able to share your story and your wisdom. And tell people where they can stay in touch with you, and certainly where they can get your book.
They can get my book on Amazon. Once again, it's called We Are All Addicts, The Soul's Guide to Kicking Your Compulsions. I'm Dr. Carter Stout. You can find me on my website. Just Google my name. It's CarderStout. I'm on Instagram at Dr. Carter Stout.
Perfect.
They can find me.
Thank you again. This was awesome.
Thanks so much.
Thanks for listening. Did you think of someone you know while you listened? Help me grow the show by sharing this episode with that person. And if you liked this episode, you'll also like the one with the man who used to live in the Vegas tunnels. It's episode 138. Stay tuned next week when I talk with a hormone specialist who's going to help us connect the dots between our hormones and our brain health.